7, so it might be a few minutes later. She had
Oh,
said.
yeah.
Okay. If they both have the agenda, they can get in through that other link like Sue and Claudia did.
That's how I came in too.
Okay.
That's how I came in, yeah.
7, so it might be a few minutes later. She had said.
Yeah.
Okay. If they
Feedback.
both have the agenda, they can get in through that other link like Sue and Claudia. Oh, hang on.
That's weird.
That was supposed to stop and it didn't. Whee. Okay, that's good. All right, it's up to you if you want to. I see actually Andrew's here now,
says he's
so let me
here.
move him over. And Brenda is here as well.
Great.
So I will move both of them over for you. All right, there we go.
Hello.
You're all
Andrew.
set. Pat.
Andrew's here, yay.
All right. So without further ado, we do have a quorum here this evening, March 17th, 2021. By way of roll call, for those who are present, Claudia McNeil,
Here.
Susan Boddington,
Here.
Isabel Mattia,
Here.
Andrew Moore.
Present.
That being a quorum, we will begin. The first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of our previous meeting, which was on the 11th of February. Those minutes were sent out by Isabel. Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions or comments in that regard?
I have a comment. Susan, I keep spelling your name all kinds of different ways. I'm sorry. I'm gonna fix
It's okay. Just remember 1D.
it. 1D.
And
Yeah.
I don't complain too much if you use 2. So sorry.
It's spelled 2 different ways in the minutes, so I'm gonna standardize that.
Yeah, it's really 1.
Is there a motion to accept those minutes then as written?
So
with the spelling correction.
I moved with the correction.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
By unanimous consent then?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Second item on tonight's agenda is a treasurer's report, which should have been sent to each of you from Joseph DeSantis, the town financial director. And in that treasurer's report, he revealed that at present, when I spoke to him prior to our March meeting, the total was $123,579. Again, $123,579. That reflects.
I didn't see any email from him.
That would have been from me.
Oh, from you.
I had sent out an email, sort of just a one-way email to everyone, so they would have that information. I'm happy to do that again.
That's all right. The total is fine. I didn't see that.
123,579, and that reflects fees collected in February alone of $7,056.80. So again, that's a significant increase month by month. There was one listing of an expense that Mr. DeSantis had included, and that being $157.50. And I did not inquire about that, but I will.
I can clarify that.
Oh, very good.
That may have been when they charged you for the 9 months of Zoom meetings that I've been operating after hours for your particular board.
Okay. Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome. That should happen once every maybe 6 weeks now that they've gotten something in order for paying for the overtime. They don't want to let it go as long as it had before.
That's good. I'm glad that justice finally prevails. That's good. All right. So there's nothing really to vote on with regard to that treasurer's report, except to, I guess, acknowledge that that number keeps growing, and let's hope that we can do some real good with it. The third item on tonight's agenda is that of selecting a treasurer. As you recall, at the February meeting, we had voted and decided to postpone electing a treasurer by virtue of Andrew's absence. And given that he is here this evening, without further ado, I'll let someone else take the floor on this item.
You mean anybody else?
I mean, anybody else. Yeah.
Let's nominate Andrew for that position.
Without consultation? Andrew, how do you feel about that?
Well, if no one else is willing to do it, then I'm okay with that.
You're really good at that, Andrew.
Yeah,
Well,
that would be really good. I would volunteer, but I am about to become treasurer of the Greater Tiverton Community Chorus, and I just became secretary for Church Community Housing, and
oh my.
I just don't think I can do
Wow.
all of those.
Wow, that's terrific. All right. So if you are willing then, Andrew,
Yep.
do we hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I'll second.
By roll call, those in favor, Claudia McNeil,
Aye.
Susan Boddington,
Aye.
Isabel Mattia,
Aye.
Andrew Moore.
Aye.
That's unanimous by consent. I will vote aye as well. Very good. Thank you very much, Andrew. We look forward to counting the money with you, I guess, or whatever that is. Thank you. The fourth item on tonight's agenda is an update regarding our proposal and plan with Housing Works Rhode Island. As you recall, we had agreed to enter into a contract with Housing Works Rhode Island whereby they would collect information effectively regarding affordable housing needs and related items there too. Andrew, I think you're the point man on that one if you have anything you'd like to add. And I know that Brenda Clement. Brenda, are you here tonight?
She is on. Brenda, you'll need to.
I am. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm just pulling into my house and my video's still off, but I can hear you.
Take your time. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Yep.
Andrew, did you want to introduce that topic?
Yeah, so I'll just give a brief update. I'll give Brenda a few minutes to get inside and get set up. But since our last meeting, the town administrator signed the agreement with Housing Works. He signed it on behalf of the Housing Trust and on behalf of the town of Little Compton. So that was all settled, and we immediately started discussions with Brenda and her team about the next steps. So Brenda suggested that the next, the first step really in our plan is to identify the proposed list of interviewees. So I don't know, Claudia and Sue, I don't know if have either one of you gotten a chance to look over the proposal that Housing Works gave to us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure because I know there was a little bit of a transition, and I
Andrew,
missed a meeting. So
could I interject to ask a question?
yeah, absolutely.
So I had noted that Brenda had sent out the contract as signed, and I didn't review it extensively, but did so briefly. And I noted that the contract at the top of the page enumerated that it was between Housing Works Rhode Island and the town of Little Compton.
Mm-hmm.
I did not see the Affordable Housing Trust, the Little Compton Housing Trust noted in the contract. And also given the idea that it was signed effectively by the town administrator, it seems to me that the contract is thusly between the town and Housing Works Rhode Island. And I only say that by way of clarification because when another town, so say the Ag Trust, for instance, when they enter into a contract, it's not the town administrator who is a signator for them, right? It would be the Ag Trust unto themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the
Ag Trust?
the way I understand it, the Ag Trust is created under state legislation, which kind of sets them up as an independent board. We're still a committee, a board underneath the town charter and by town ordinance.
But also by town vote annually, we're given certain authorities and powers. And I don't mean to make this a power grab in any way, shape, or form, but only to say that there's no representative from this housing trust that signed that contract.
Mm-hmm.
And so only to the extent that perhaps it will come out of the general fund from the town and not from our proceeds. I don't know how to move forward on that. You know, I guess I was surprised to see that it wasn't signed by one of us.
And I interject.
Yeah, Carol.
Yeah, Andrew's correct in the sense that the Ag Trust is set up by enabling legislation. The Housing Trust, which is your board, was established by the town council and has no rights in and of themselves without going to the council for permission to enter into contracts. Now, should they have had some signature from your group on that contract as well as the town administrator, that might have been nice. But I don't think Tony is used to how to handle this type of layering of government. He's used to something where the town administrator has the final say on absolutely everything. So that might have been where the confusion came in a little bit, where he didn't have any signature from your group.
And I can sympathize with Tony, and I appreciate the work that he does, but only to the extent that the Housing Trust bylaws and the town charter both specifically grant to the Housing Trust the authority to enter into contracts.
It does. And what should have
And
happened
it doesn't
is,
stipulate that we need permission from the council on a case-by-case basis to do that. That's
what-
annually ratified.
right, when you went to the council for, I guess, ratification of what actions you wanted to take, I think they perceived that they would be the ones to enter into the contract. I have to agree that it should have been the Housing Trust that actually entered into the contract, because it's an action that you asked them to ratify that you were going to do. I don't think that nullifies what's happened. It just muddies the water a little bit.
So that's my point, is not to suggest that we would back out of this in any way, shape, or form, but just, I guess, primarily from the sense of the idea of us working more closely with Housing Works Rhode Island and having the legal authority to do so. There may be some correction added to that, or qualification added to that, because as it stands, we're not a party to that contract.
Right.
And
I think
we
an
would-
addendum should be made just to
Right.
clarify that.
And I'm happy to do whatever research by way of the town solicitor or contact with regard to the town solicitor that might be necessary. But I think in our interests, we need to have a place at the table, if you will.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know that you need to go to the level of the solicitor. I think it just needs to be explained to the administrator and an addendum drawn up that clarifies who the Housing Trust is actually working with.
Should we make a motion to that?
I will note just one thing in the contract, that they do refer to the Housing Trust through Exhibit A in terms of our agreement with them with the proposal. You know, they do say that they'll be working with the Housing Trust and collaborating with us in this project. But I'm happy, you know, clarifying in some way.
I think it's worth asking the question anyhow.
Mhm. Well, and also when I was speaking with Tony, you know, the town administrator, you know, he realizes that this is our project. You know, there was no, I didn't sense any, I didn't sense that he was trying to take it from us. He just signed. We basically sent. I sent him the contract that Brenda drafted with the proposal that we had agreed on, and he said, "All right, great. If if that's what you guys are doing, that's fantastic. I'll sign it." And that was the end of it. But I see where you're coming from, Patrick.
Yeah, it seems as if it's also a good time to kind of establish a precedent of how we operate and for future contracts and other work that's going to be done.
Mhm.
How do we, what is the flow of information and authority in terms of making payments and approving work that's been done, et cetera.
Is that something that you'd like me to inquire with Tony about, Andrew, or perhaps we could both get together and meet with him?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially if we're going to be spending money from the, the Housing Trust Fund in the future. Maybe we're going to need to figure out how we as a, as a board approve those expenditures. Do we approve them? Does the council approve them? I mean, we're going to have to figure that out going forward. So I think it makes sense having that conversation.
So I'll look forward to getting in contact with you after the meeting at some point in time, and perhaps we could meet with Tony.
Okay. So
This is Brenda. Can I just make a quick note too, that just so that you know internally, if we do make any revisions to the contract, I have to run it back through the food chain here at the university and through general counsel. I'm happy to continue to act in good faith under our existing contract, assuming that there won't be any substantive amendments, but just so that you know, will have to go run it back through an internal process as well.
Yeah, that would make sense. I understand completely. And I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench into things, but only by way of clarification. So, but otherwise, I thought that the contract was good, and I thought it's significant progress that we're making by starting this,
So I don't know, Patrick, did you want to do anything, or do we kind of agree that we're all acting in good faith here?
I would absolutely agree with that, Andrew. Yeah, there's no substantive change that I would suggest, except that some representative from the Housing Trust signs that contract.
Okay, well, let's talk with Tony about it too, to see what, I think that makes sense, what he wants to do.
So we'll get together after the meeting at some point in time with Tony, and we'll figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Thank you.
But going forward with the proposal and the plan, I think so. The first step that Brenda had identified was identifying. Sorry, I'm pulling up the identifying the key informants for the interviews, and her team quickly kind of put together a list of 10 folks that might be a good cross section from the town that might help them in this study in looking at affordable housing and moving forward. So quickly, this is by no means an official or approved list, and I can send it around. But so
I sent it out with the agenda. Did everybody get it?
Okay, so did they
Yeah.
see this with, so it was Susan Boddington, the town solicitor. I don't know, did we
Why
discuss?
is Tiverton on there?
Well, it was just a little, it was a mistake. It was just a proposal that they meant to put, I think they meant to put Richard Humphrey on here, or an attorney with experience in affordable housing in town. Christian Bell.
Brenda, you might want to chime in on that. On Andy Tights, was that because of his experience with affordable housing, or did you mean?
Yeah, in general, we also thought that he had done some special counsel work with the town at one point in time on some housing projects, but that could be a faulty memory on our part. But as Susan knows, and hello, Susan, so glad to see you.
Hi, Brenda.
in this capacity. But in any case, as Susan knows, and as others of you may know, Andrew is, a really experienced attorney on land use and affordable housing development in many areas and many towns. And so even if he's not specific to your town, I think he still would be helpful to include. But we had originally included him on the list because we thought that he had done some work specifically for the town. But obviously the ultimate list is your choice. So.
But I think it does make sense including an attorney that has had experience with land use issues in Little Compton. So I think we should, keep that on the list for now. Maybe not Andy, but we can discuss that.
Okay.
He
Oh.
has done work for Little Compton before. He actually was one of the attorneys that drafted the Affordable Housing Trust element with
Okay,
the town.
well, that's good to know then.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Brenda, who were you guys referring to with Christian Belden? I don't know them.
So Christian's the executive director at Church Community Housing Corp. And they have done work obviously throughout the Quidnet Island area, but also has been involved in a proposed project in Little Compton. I don't remember how long ago now, Susan, but you.
Yeah,
you
Church Community has built, I think it's 3 houses so
Yeah.
far. Little Compton just finished one this last year.
Christian
Correct.
has been to Housing Trust meeting some years ago as well.
Mhm.
We've met him, but
Well-
and certainly Church Community Housing is the go-to organization in Newport County.
Right, and some of you may know the previous executive director, Steve Ostagai, who's retired, but as Susan mentioned, she's also in her new life and actively involved in their board as well too. So I do think he's worth keeping on the list.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And just running through the rest of this list, number 4, they suggested the planning board chair. Number 5, the zoning board chair. 6, Ag Conservancy Trust member. Number 7, a for-profit developer. Number 8, town council president. Number 9, housing trust member. They just put Isabel there as a possibility. And then I had suggested maybe including members of the community that, might benefit from affordable housing, or members of the community that qualify but don't currently live in affordable housing. And I also suggested maybe Tom and Josie Arkins might be good members of the, community to be interviewed on this subject. But we can discuss this and make revisions to give to Brenda and her team, so they can.
And so
get going
is it
on
a
that.
total of 10 individuals that we're looking at, or is there some flexibility there, or it sounds like we might have more than 10?
Yeah, I mean, initially in our scope, we were trying to limit it to 10. We can go up a couple more, but as you know, but we don't want to go up to 20. I'm willing to go up to 12 or 13 or so,
Yeah.
but not too much more than that, just because it becomes pretty difficult to meet our time frame.
Just
I
add,
thought it
we,
might be-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. It was,
Oh, I was going to say, we also had discussed Amanda Nickerson Toasty, who's a local homeowner and
Oh, yeah.
real estate agent. So I stuck her on the draft version of that as well.
yeah, I was thinking what seemed to be missing here is maybe one of the organizations in town who are working directly with seniors, whether it's community center or stay at home. Somebody on staff who sees people day in and day out might have some really good input for us, I would think.
Or maybe
Maybe-
Sue Sisson.
What about Sue Chase?
Or Sue Sisson.
So, yeah, I had, and I don't know, was it the intention to discuss these candidates?
I'm sorry. What was that?
I think so. I think that's the intention, yeah, to
So,
discuss them.
Sue Sisson is the social services coordinator in town, and I think that she would be instrumental to have on that list. My feeling on interviewing the head of the planning board and the zoning board and the ag trust is that their input can be solicited by anyone, right? And perhaps their input could just be included without having to have them interviewed. But among the others that I was thinking of would be perhaps Marjorie O'Toole, who is the president of the Historical Society, but moreover, she worked administratively when Arkins Construction was building the affordable housing complex in the Commons. I say complex, but the affordable housing project they did. Another person who might be instrumental would be Caroline Wardell. She is on the board of the Little Compton Scholarship Fund. Grew up in town and has a pretty good idea of many of those who might be in a situation to need affordable housing across town. Stephanie Wilkie is an employee of the town police department, and she is a dispatcher. So I'm not sure if her opinion could lend any value to any interview. I agree with Susan completely that a representative of either the Little Compton Wellness Center or the Community Center or Stay at Home in Little Compton could be valuable as well.
We still don't have anybody who is actually needing of somebody who needs the affordable housing and has had to deal with trying to figure out how to get affordable housing or how, and like just knows the needs because they need it. I mean, we don't have anybody on this list that is actively searching for affordable housing. Maybe Stephanie Wilkie, I don't know if she is, I don't know.
I don't think
I don't know who she is.
a candidate, but yeah, I guess, Brenda, is it your opinion that there would be value in interviewing candidates or those seeking affordable housing?
So I want to keep in mind, keep reminding you too, that there's a survey component to this as well too, which will, we can direct and capture some of these individuals. Again, the ultimate decision of kind of who's on the list of 10 to 12 or so interviewees is you, but part of the reason for the key informant interviews is to try to get information that you might not get from a survey, but also people who bring a certain expertise to the process or to the topic. So, to your point about planning and zoning board people, they're key and critical in terms of developing affordable housing in your community. So I would keep them on the list, quite frankly. And then perhaps some of the other individuals that you talked about from the historic preservation and police and even seniors and other people, those individuals might be better to target more in the survey. But ultimately it's your choice as to kind of who you want included on that list. But just keep in mind that we're trying to pull from those key informants kind of challenges, issues, opportunities that they see that would allow the town to address more affordable housing or to build and develop more affordable housing in their community. So that's the lens that you should think about when you're trying to finalize that list.
Just a question, would Tom and Josie Arkins fit in the for-profit developer slot?
That's what I was thinking too, same thing.
I'm sorry, Andrew, I didn't hear the name.
Tom and Josie Arkins, they've developed a few affordable housing units in town. I think they would fit that bill.
I assume that I don't know him, so I'm assuming he's a for-profit developer. So yes, I guess they would.
Yeah, but they're on a small, pretty small scale.
Mm-hmm.
But they have experience doing it here in Little Compton. So,
Brenda, could I inquire as to who would be doing the interviews from Housing Works Rhode Island and who will develop the questions? And will each candidate be asked the same questions?
Each candidate will be asked pretty identical questions. Obviously, there may be some additional or add-on questions once you get an answer from somebody, but generally the questions are standardized. We'll develop a draft of the questions, but then would obviously want input and feedback from this group around those specific questions as well.
Will it be the same representative from Housing Works doing all of it?
More than likely, yes, it will likely be our research director, Annette Bourne, who Susan knows well. And that was Annette worked with Susan when Susan was at Rhode Island Housing. And Annette has lots of experience in doing this work in many capacities.
How would you envision the interviews would be different from the general survey?
Well, obviously with the interviews, you have a chance to go a little bit deeper into some of the questions we're trying to get, at talking to some of the individuals who might have some expert or expertise in a certain area, like planning, like development, other things, and trying to identify issues that they see in helping the town meet some of their affordable housing goals.
Would those interviews be recorded in any way that you're aware of?
We generally do record them so that we can transcribe them. And obviously we would do that and notify individuals and seek their permission before we do that. But we use those recordings and the transcriptions of them to develop to analyze, but also to develop the final report.
So Brenda, what would be most helpful from us to move forward?
So most helpful at this point would be for you to finalize the list. We have started drafting the questions. I apologize that we didn't have anything to share with you tonight, but we've been on other deadlines, but we'll try to get some draft questions out to you sooner rather than later. And then we can start scheduling interviews, ASAP as soon as the list has started. At the same time, we also need to start to think about the timing of the survey to a larger population and start to think about who are key targets that we want to send the survey to, and also, who do we want to do some more specific follow-up to make sure that they fill out that survey as well. So I know we had talked more, with that survey of doing kind of more of a town-wide participation, but just need to think through some of the logistics of that because it's been a while since we talked about the particulars of that.
Okay, so do we, Patrick, do we want to try and whittle down the list a little bit? Because it seems like we've identified a lot of folks in the last 10 minutes.
I guess, based upon the responses from several of us, this list may require a little bit more thinking. I don't know how anyone else feels about that.
I agree.
But I'd like to maybe put a deadline on it or something, because I want us to.
Yeah. Yes, good idea.
I mean, do you want to try to hash it out for a few minutes, or do you think it's better to, for us to send each other proposals?
I guess I don't want to waste Brenda's time while we're discussing it. And I don't know ultimately what conclusion we may come to, and we may want to move one way or another. And if each of us were to think about candidates and then come back at next month's meeting and have each of us with a list, compare and contrast, that maybe would be better. I don't know. I don't want to hold up the process either.
Brenda, when are you hoping to have this list by?
We've been talking about this project for quite some time. And so I really need to get cracking on it just because we are also hitting timeline for our other major project, our fact book development. And so Annette's time and my time become very scarce very quickly here soon. So I would say that if we can get this lit, we can start to work on the survey questions. And at the same time as you're finalizing the list, we can hopefully start to finalize the survey questions. But I would like to be able to start interviews no later than April 1st.
So, I sort of feel like I can just give you my opinions if you want on the list. I would say now that Sue Boddington is also a housing commission member, that seems like, so you could kind of perhaps serve in both of those roles. So that would bring us down one. And then I personally don't, based on our history and conversations, and I say this with a little bit of caution, but I don't personally think the Agricultural Conservancy Trust is going to be a particularly useful interview, especially in comparison to somebody like Sue Sisson or Sue Chase, perhaps. So I might replace that one with somebody who's more familiar with, like, who we're kind of identifying as an expert in social services or senior services or a food bank.
Can I make a suggestion?
I would just
Sure.
also caution, though, that we're as part of this survey is to kind of get opposition too, to hear problems and to hear barriers that may exist. So it's helpful and have people participate who have direct contact and services to individuals, but I kind of know what I'm going to hear from them. I would rather hear from the agricultural group or the planning board or the other people as to what they see as obstacles for development, water, sewer, whatever the issues are in a community. That's the stuff that's more helpful for us, I think, at this stage of the game.
That's good to know.
Isabel, did you write down all the suggestions that we had heard?
Yes.
Would you mind?
I guess
Could you share a screen or something so we can all visualize it?
And if you prefer me to drop off while you discuss this, I'm happy to do that. So just tell me when to go.
I'm not sure that I agree with the idea that we don't need to hear from social services directors or people who deal with the public. On the contrary, I think that we know what's going to be said by many of those who occupy seats on the planning board, or the zoning board, or the ag trust. So I do agree with Isabel to that extent. And again, I think to some extent, many of the opinions, I say opinions, of those individuals would be evident by looking at any of their meetings or hearing what they've said in the past. I think to Claudia's point, the ones that we really don't hear from enough are those that are hiding in the shadows, those people who don't have a voice at the table in this town. And I think to some extent, it's social services directors or people who work in the community center who are going to have a better idea, or even clergy members in town, perhaps, who would have a better idea of where the real affordable housing needs are, more so than those who are on the planning board, at the zoning board, or the ag trust. And the word development, if we go at this using affordable housing development, it's a non-starter. The idea that a for-profit developer is going to come into town and do an affordable housing development, I'm sure would be frowned upon.
Well, we already have that, Patrick. Tom and Josie are for-profit.
But I don't know that anyone would characterize that in the development sense,
Yeah, but that's what they are. I mean, that's what it is.
No, clearly it is. Yeah, and clearly it involved the zoning board changing zoning in that location.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be really valuable. I've spoken to them a little bit, before I was on the trust about their experience. They will definitely be able to speak to some of the challenges as well.
I agree. They're in a unique position to do so.
Well, maybe, do you think we can agree on a few people today to put forward to Brenda and her team so they can get going on that, and then, come up with a few more in the next couple of weeks? Because I mean, honestly, I think Sue was at the top of the list. If Sue is willing to be one of the key informants as our Sue Boddington,
Okay.
as our housing trust member, but also with the experience that you have, I think you'd be invaluable in that aspect. So Sue, I think from what I hear from Isabel and Pat that Tom and Josie would be pretty good informants
Yes.
as developers. And I don't mean like big developers. I just mean with what they've done.
Well, and there's perspective because they've been through the process and
Absolutely.
lived with the frustration. This is not an easy business. Live through the frustration of trying to get funding, trying to find tenants who qualify, et cetera. So I think it would be good to have their input.
I think that'd be great. And then I think we should keep Christian Belden on there. Someone from out of town that has done work in Little Compton. I think that's a pretty good viewpoint. I don't know how everyone else feels about the rest of the list and what we might be able to suggest to Brenda tonight to start moving.
Would it make sense, instead of having planning and zoning, to have one or the other? And I would think planning. Most of what gets proposed would end up probably before the planning board for a comprehensive permit, or, in some way or another, but one or the other, because we're probably going to get pretty much the same perspective, I would think, from both planning and zoning.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think obviously in bigger cities, both are a little bit more important, but if I had to pick one in a town of like Little Compton, I would pick planning.
So toward that end, I think the person we might be talking about would be Mike Steers, who is the chair of the planning board, but also has a seat on the Ag Trust, if I'm not mistaken. So we
Yes,
get
he does.
2 birds with 1 stone on that. So
Yes.
That's a good
Right.
idea.
Great.
we'd
Love
shed-
that.
Yeah. Also on your initial list, Brenda, was the town council president.
Do we need that?
I don't know. I think it was on the initial list. I don't know how the board feels about that.
I mean, I'm fine if everyone else wants to, but I think maybe we can hold off on putting
Could
president on
could
this.
there be value in interviewing the town clerk if she
No.
would be so inclined?
Wouldn't Andrew be the good choice? Is that what I wanted to say?
So I
No.
guess that from the town council perspective, we're, again, trying to get the political aspect of things as well too, and vision of things. As you know, a lot of times things can be approved and go through the planning department, but then meet political barriers at a council level. So it's that perspective is what we're trying to capture with that person.
Also, I think the town council president was very involved with the Arkins development from day
That's-
one, sat through all the meetings. We worked pretty closely with him. So I think his perspective might be interesting, him having gone through this process once, and also has seen a number of proposals that haven't gone through in the town. And I kind of think that perspective might be helpful to us.
I agree with Susan.
So what's the list that we have so far that we've kind of talked about and kind of all agreed on? We've got
Susan
Tom,
Boddington.
so we've got Sue
Yes.
Boddington. The
Tom and Josie,
Um,
I have Tom and Josie Arkins, is that their last name?
Yes.
Christian Belden, the planning director. I think you said his name is Mike Steers. Sorry, I don't have my list in
Yep.
front of me. And then the
Planning
council,
board chair.
the council president. So that's 5 so far.
Okay, well, I'd be comfortable proposing those 5 to start with. So Brenda has something to work with, and then we can give the rest some thought, maybe. Patrick, how do you feel about that?
I guess I feel strongly that the town of Little Compton has a social services director, and as such, it would seem to me that her voice could be significant in this conversation. And I understand that we know perhaps the angle that a certain party may come at something from, but she may have statistical data that could be helpful for such an interview.
And that's Sue Sisson?
Yeah,
Is she still part of that group that you were talking about? Because I thought Elizabeth Woodhouse is now the liaison between the
Elizabeth,
pantry.
yes, Elizabeth Woodhouse took over the food pantry, but
Took over the
Susan,
food pantry.
yeah, and she just did that recently.
Right.
Yeah. So the food bank is now being managed, I guess, or overseen by Elizabeth, but Sue Sisson still has her hands in everything else.
Okay.
How do you all feel about the Amanda Nickerson Toasty? She's the real estate agent / homeowner. I've spoken to her a little bit. I think she's really knowledgeable and would be she's really knowledgeable about like the way the housing market has been moving in the past few years.
Yeah, Brenda, I'm just curious, in your experience, how, you know, how important is it to have the real estate side in terms of a real estate agent knowing what the market is in town, and is that helpful?
Yeah, I think it could be very helpful, particularly, you know, with kind of things that have been happening this last year, and trying to see the impact that you're seeing from COVID and other things as well too. So yeah, I think that could be a good, interesting perspective.
I think Little Compton has a very unique market
Mhm.
in terms of Rhode Island as a whole. We don't really follow the same trends that most of the other towns and cities do across the state. So I think that might be valuable.
Yeah.
That gives you 7.
Including Sue, is that?
If you include Sue Sisson and Amanda Toasty, that's now 7.
So where are you? Is there agreement on Andy Tights?
Oh, actually, he's probably a very good one to keep on your list.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me
Okay.
too.
We got the 8.
Yeah, I mean, we might be able to just get this done tonight if we
Yeah,
keep doing
even better.
it.
So
The other person I thought about, the other person I thought about in terms of builders would be Dennis Talbot, who's been very interested in this issue, and his perspective on, you know, trying to get anything built might be of interest.
I agree. Full disclosure, I used to work for Dennis many moons ago. And I don't see why he wouldn't be willing to undergo an interview. He is a for-profit developer in town of sorts. So I don't know if anyone else here knows him, but many of those individuals in the building business in town here began their careers with him. So he has been around for some time. I agree with you, Susan, that he could be valuable.
Do we need more than one developer on this, in this group? Like Tom Arkins and that one that Sue mentioned?
Brenda, would that be useful?
Yeah, Brenda, would that be useful?
I think it's helpful. It sounds, is the second gentleman that you're mentioning, is he a kind of a bigger developer, or he's kind of had it sounded like the first one that you mentioned had more recent experience doing an affordable development, so that's probably of value and use, but his more historical perspective could be helpful as well.
Tom Arkins started his building career with Dennis Talbot also. So from the standpoint of experience, I guess Dennis's voice could be significant.
But I definitely want to keep the Arkins on the list.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I think the Arkins have a specific, this might be a controversial suggestion, but what about somebody from the Borges family? Would that be useful? Have that historical perspective of that past project that didn't happen?
You'll get that from Christian Belden.
Okay.
Church,
Great.
it was Church Community Housing that was proposing the development there.
Okay, so that story will be part of the story. This was my
I would think so. Yes.
Okay.
That's good.
Did we come to an agreement on Dennis Talbot? Do we want?
I don't know him, but if you all think that sounds like a good person to include, I don't have any opposition to it.
So Dennis would be more like past developers, representing past developers and more knowledgeable, and Tom would be like more current.
And specifically, Tom specifically did a affordable project. So.
And Dennis is still very much in business. I'd say that he and Tom probably bid on the same jobs every now and again, but I think that they would have different opinions and perspectives. And
that's what we want.
Tom has the experience specifically in developing affordable housing. So.
Okay, well, so that's 9, including Dennis, I think.
Yes.
That is 9.
Yep, that's 9.
Yeah. some of the names that you mentioned when we first came on, well, first of all, a representative from seniors or senior center or other community, Marjorie O'Toole from the Historic Preservation, and I'm missing somebody else, Carolyn Wydell, but I'm not sure where she was from. So I don't know if any of those names are still kind of in your mix.
I think
Was Stephanie Wilkie's contribution?
Only that she works for the police department as a dispatcher. And again, I'm not sure, whether an interview versus a survey would make any difference.
not undermining the other folks that we mentioned, but I think Sue kind of covers the seniors stay at home. She's not with stay at home, but that group. And
It's
she
Sue
is
Sisson.
yeah,
Sue
Sue Sisson. And
Okay.
Sue Sisson is also a town employee who
Yeah.
So that might kind of cover the dispatcher side too. So I don't know.
I agree, Andrew.
And Marjorie put together the Arkins project, so you probably don't need all of them.
And again, all of these people can be kind of on the target list for surveys. You might send the survey out to a large group, but then do some more specific follow-up with individuals that you want to make sure respond to the survey. So, be kind of assembling those names too as you're going along.
Yeah, I was thinking I have a friend who lives in the Arkins building, but I think maybe she would be more, we can get her to fill out the survey.
Do we need someone else from this group, from the Housing Trust? I don't need to take over, we did have two names on the list to begin with. Should we have a couple of different perspectives from this trust?
We're at 8, so I think we can possibly afford to add.
Well, we're at 9 with Dennis.
We're at
Dennis.
9.
I'm sorry, 9.
Or at 9.
Claudia, would you want to be a key informant?
I think I would. To represent the elders and people who need housing.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this board as well,
And what?
and us.
And us.
So that's 10. Do we want to move those 10 that we just discussed to send to Brenda so they can get started?
So I'll read out the names and we can propose a motion as to whether or not we would like to forward these 10 names. So Susan Boddington, Tom and Josie Arkins, Christian Belden, Mike Steers, Robert Mushin, Amanda Nickerson Toasty, Sue Sisson, Andrew Tights,
Yeah.
Dennis Talbot, Claudia McNeil.
I'll make that motion.
Second, it's a solid list.
I agree. By roll call, Claudia, how do you vote?
Aye.
Susan Boddington,
Aye.
Isabel Mattia,
Aye.
Andy Moore.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you.
Great. There's a bunch of emails we don't have to send.
Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah, great. And so we will work on getting survey questions, interview questions out to you as soon as we can. And so that, as I said, so that we can hopefully start the interviews maybe even before April 1st, if we can finalize those questions before then.
Okay.
Great.
Is there any more business we have with Housing Works Rhode Island this evening?
Brenda, I was just wondering if, as far as the survey questions and topics, would you like input from us on that as well? And if so, by when?
Yes, we would, and soon, within the next week or so, if possible. If there's already questions that you have that you want us to include, or kind of key issues that you want to make sure we cover, that would be helpful to us as we draft those questions. But we will send you a draft of the questions before we start the interviews so that you can add some comments. But if you have any general direction, that would be extremely helpful.
Isabel, perhaps you and I could come up with a contact information or more contact information for these 10 individuals, I'll assemble what I can and we can forward it to you, Brenda.
Yeah, that would also be helpful. We have some of that contact info, but not everybody. So that would be great.
Very good. Brenda, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for your hard work, everyone, and look forward to getting rolling here.
Thank
Thanks
Thank you,
again.
Brenda. Good to see you.
Thank you so much,
Same
Brenda.
here. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
All right. So that brings us to our 5th item on this evening's agenda, that being discussing eligible properties for affordable housing. I'm hoping that everyone received the information that I had emailed out regarding a piece of property in town at 9 Crandall Road.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone had any opinions or any other candidates, properties that might be of interest.
Is that only 1 acre?
It's 1.03 acres. That's right.
Yeah. And you're proposing that for affordable housing?
As a piece of property in town that is for sale. Yes.
Yeah, that's seems like a very small parcel.
Well, I guess by Little Compton standards it is, but
Right.
by many other standards it's not. I don't know how anyone else feels about it. Only that it's not frequent that a building lot comes for sale in town. I mean, it's listed on $175,000.
Right.
Its assessed value is $159,000. It has been on the market for some time. In spite of its 1.03 acre size, it is a pre-platted lot of record in town. And it would, by rights, accommodate a 2-unit building that would be affordable, dedicated to affordable housing, if I'm not mistaken. So only to say that it is available, and by Little Compton standards, it would be reasonable price-wise. I don't know how anyone else might feel about that.
Does anybody know anything about that property that's on Maple, that where they just knocked all the trees down in the past month? That's between Simmons and William Sisson Road. There's like a 2 or 3 plot. I don't know. There's a pretty big bit of land that was just where all the trees were knocked down. I don't know if anybody knows anything about it, if it's for sale or what.
I don't believe it's on the market.
No? Oh, on the market.
I love the idea of the housing trust buying a piece of property. Just gonna start with that because I think that'd be pretty cool.
Could put up a bunch of yurts.
Yeah. What I just don't even know where to start, honestly. That's my holdup.
Yeah, I think that the idea of us having some land that we hold in perpetuity for the purpose of affordable housing it's just an exciting concept.
Yeah, I went and looked at the land and, the price compared to what's available in Little Compton, the price looks pretty good. I will say, however, that there's been a real challenge over the last few years trying to get single family lots built out. Church Community Housing has been working with the town of Jamestown, and Jamestown has given them lots, one that has an existing house on it and some vacant land. Church Community also owns, I think 3, 4, maybe 5 lots in Tiverton outright. So they could build on those. They have not been able to get financing from the state, any of the state programs, because by the time you put in water, sewer, build a house, then you're talking about, something that's $300,000 or so. Even without the cost of if you take the cost of the land out of it. So they've been really struggling to try to find a way to compete statewide, the limited funds that are available are all awarded by competition, and the state's been awarding them to developments that come in at, 200, 250,000 a unit. So it's been a constant battle, and they're still trying to figure that out. So they have a number of vacant lots that they could build on with no acquisition cost at this point. If the trust was able to buy a lot and then have church community or somebody else build on it, it might, if you take that cost of acquisition out of it and keep it in trust, which is the way their land trust, the church community land trust works, that might have some potential. I'm just raising it as it's not getting the financing and getting it developed is not an easy task, and trying to do that and keep it affordable at the same time is difficult. Now, if you have 2 units there, or perhaps even building 2 separate homes in there, it might be a possibility. If it's land trusted property, you might be able to put more than one home on it. Depends on, what its tolerance is for, sewer and wells and whatnot. If it were bigger, then, more units would obviously make it more feasible, and the, cost per unit of acquisition would be less.
I also think, though, that if we consider one of the challenges to developing anything in this town is, if you propose something that is in fact big, it can be met with significant opposition. And the exception to that obviously would be Tom and Josie Arkins at the Commons, but that's also a commercially zoned district. And we're not likely to find that in too many places in this town, where a developer could come in and develop a lot of units in a smaller footprint of land, Among the advantages that I saw on the lot at 9 Crandall Road was the fact that it is on a state highway. It's a very convenient location for people working in or out of town. The land adjacent to it seems to be high and dry, such that a septic system could be perhaps a conventional type of system and wouldn't require an expensive bottomless sand filter or expensive new technologies. So for those reasons, it may be worth pursuing a loan, because buildable land in this town, as we all know, is scarce.
So I
has-
think we would want to come up with a proposal of what we envision there, and cost that out a bit. Because obviously, if we're going to propose anything, someone's going to ask us what are we going to do with it? What is it going to cost? How affordable is it going to be, et cetera? Just to have at least some rough outline of it. I mean, if we bought something and it didn't, and we decided it wasn't feasible, market's probably always going to be strong enough to turn around and sell it again if we really had to.
One of the big questions would be to have engineering done to determine what size septic system or how many bedrooms a septic system would be there,
Mm-hmm.
And to my knowledge, there has been no engineering done there, which is one of the reasons I think it's been on the market for so long. I know that the Housing Trust has in the past engaged the services of engineers to do engineering work on prospective pieces of property. There was one on Old Stone Church Road about 10 years ago. So I think, Andrew, though, to the extent that the town council would have to approve of any purchase, whether this parcel or any other, what's your take on how that would go with the town council? What would the process be like?
Well, from what I understand, it would have to be approved at financial town meeting.
Or a special town meeting?
Special financial town meeting. And I think the council would still have to approve it before it was put on the warrant. I don't know if Carol's listening, or she can hear.
I am listening. I think that they would have to ratify your desire to put something on the warrant, but you could directly submit something to me to call for a special financial town meeting.
Mhm.
I mean, if you had ducks in a row already, you could petition the council to see if it could be put on this year's, even though it's out of time for the normal budget process. But I don't know that you're going to be able to pull that sort of thing off. You're probably looking at something months out and not for May 18th is what I'm getting at.
I'd agree.
I do think, one of the challenges is not having a direction with the property, or at least not having like the vision. 'Cause I think people in town would want to see what are you planning on doing there? We might say, well, we want to make this affordable housing, and their mind's going to go to the, whatever scenario they envision. I don't want to say the worst possible scenario, but it might be the worst scenario in their own minds. So I think it's important that we have a vision for the property. But I do think that's a great location, Patrick. I think, it's close to Adamsville, close to, food resources, easy to travel. So I don't know what the next step is with that, but I think we should definitely consider it.
I think the possibility of having a 2-family or a 2-unit thing there is pretty exciting as well, too.
Yeah.
The model that Susan described with church community housing, whereby church community housing owns the land, they develop a house and then sell the house with a 99-year lease, is what makes their developments affordable here in town and elsewhere. And I realize that many people lack a vision and need to see things in pictures or, up front. But I think to some extent, there's a leap of faith necessary here that first and foremost, the acquisition of a piece of property, which would be in perpetuity affordable housing, is a huge step for this town. And the land would be the town of Little Compton.
Mm-hmm.
So, and whether it's teacher or firefighter or whomever, someone who works in this town, perhaps, who lives there would be a wonderful thing. So I'm not sure if there are any suggestions as to how we may move forward or if we should move forward.
So what's stopping us is that we don't know what the land can hold sewage wise and stuff like that, right?
I think that's the primary one from a development standpoint.
But if, let's say, we could figure out a way to get it on the warrant or get it in front of the financial town meeting for this year, real quick. If it doesn't work out that it's feasible for affordable housing, we could then turn around and sell it. Is that?
Well, we couldn't purchase it until it was first approved by the council and by a townwide vote to acquire.
Okay. And we can't, can they hold on to it for a year before we actually buy it?
Well, it would depend upon the owner of the property being willing to work with the town of Little Compton through the housing trust. And there's no guarantees. I mean, an owner wants to sell.
Right, that's a lot of ifs.
Yeah.
Mrs. McNeil, if your concern is like that we'd have to wait until the next year, we have the ability to ask for a special meeting at any time of year. So if we, it's not like we have to get into the annual financial town meeting. We just have to call a meeting. So we do have to get approved by the town, but it doesn't have to be like in May.
So does it cost a lot of money to get a special town meeting, financial town meeting?
Well, depends. Right now, we're doing town meetings by Zoom, so it's just a matter of the staff that gets paid, as opposed to when we go back to doing it in person, it's maybe around probably a 2,000 mark for how much we pay for sound systems and staff and that sort of stuff.
And what about the mailing? We'd have
Well,
to,
yeah, I
yeah,
wasn't including the mailing. I was just counting my part. Yeah. So you're probably talking closer to 4,000 by the time you do the mailing of the report to warn people what you're going to be asking them for.
And do you need a majority of the voters in town to vote on it?
You need 5% of the voters to show up into the town meeting. So that's usually somewhere around 160 people.
Is that possible?
oh, yeah.
It happens every year.
At a special?
We've only had a few specials, but usually specials are very important, so people do show up.
Oh, that's good to know.
The
Okay.
one way to get there, I don't know anything about who the owners are or whatever, but if they were motivated to be helpful with all of this, you could negotiate a purchase and sales agreement with them that was dependent upon approval by the town, engineering, whatever else we needed to know. Could even put a time limit on that, could get a 6-month, 12-month, whatever, purchase and sales, agreeing to purchase the property for a certain amount, subject to those approvals. It's very frustrating for an owner to have to wait for all of those things before a sale can go through. So you'd have to have somebody who was willing to go through that process, and we'd have to kind of try to figure out how long it was going to take us to get there.
But it does seem like this property's been on the market for a while, so who knows what the issue is or what the holdup's been, or or they might be willing to wait a little longer too, if it's been this long. So
it does raise the question, given that we do have a significant amount of money in the bank and we're talking about potentially acquiring a piece of property. It may be worthy of thinking and talking about hiring counsel, a lawyer of our own for such a transaction. I'm not sure that it would be something that the town solicitor would take part in, but I think before any of us were to enter into any contractual agreement to purchase any property, that a lawyer should be consulted, perhaps. I don't know how anyone feels about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
We don't even have 175,000, do we?
No.
We're
No.
about $16,000 short of that.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to be negative about this idea, because I'm fully in support of acquiring property, but we are moving forward with this proposal with Housing Works, and my
Right.
expectation at the end is that they're going to help us figure out what the best use of money might be, because to Sue's point, there's so many factors that go into developing affordable housing, and different costs that might hold it up in town. Maybe at some point we can offer to help pay for, instead of acquiring property, maybe our dollars are better spent, offering to help pay for, the sewage and water or something, or, that sort of stuff. So I'm trying to, I don't want to wait too long, because this does seem like a great prospect, but I'm also considering that, we've got this study going on, which might help us figure out what our best use of energy and funds might be going forward. So it's just a thought.
And how much is the study costing us?
It's about $6,000.
Oh, okay. So that's like a drop in the bucket compared to the 175.
I agree with you, Andrew. But I would also suggest that solving the affordable housing issues that we have in town is not a single solution.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly the acquisition of property has to be a part of that in some way, shape, or form, right? The challenges of acquiring an existing house include the possibility of lead paint, as well as HUD compliance, asbestos accessibility from ADA, Americans with Disabilities standpoint. So an existing building could be a challenge. Raw land obviously requires a well and a septic system, which is also a challenge. But so I see where you're going, Andrew, that, you know, it might be good to get the results of this study back, but I don't know that they're mutually exclusive, I guess, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I also don't I don't want this comment to open up a whole can of worms, like because we'll be here till midnight, but I also am thinking, like, I think I agree with you that the acquisition of properties is going to be essential for us. And I'm also noticing that, like, this one property, which I think it sounds like a great fit. You know, it's our whole trust, and that just sort of brings up the question that, like, I think we're going to have to start talking about how to get more income into this trust, if we're going to do, you know, more than just. How long has it taken us to get to? I'm so happy we have it, but you know, if it takes, how long has it taken us to get to, you know, enough money to buy 1 acre? So I think there's a bigger question there too that we need to think about. You know, we're not going to solve that at this meeting, but.
Well, I will say, I mean, I don't know, who knows what will happen at the state legislature, but there was a bill put forward this year that would establish conveyance tax on anything over $500,000 for affordable housing. I don't know how that money would be dispersed, but, you know, I think that's kind of what you're speaking to, Isabel, is what are other sources of funding that we can look for, you know?
Donations are always good.
Yeah.
And there are lots of sources of funding that we could leverage. And I think that's kind of where I started off with, you know, probably a few years ago wouldn't have been as much of an issue. Might have thought we could jump on it and somebody will fund it. But just recently, in the last couple of years, funding has been very tight and very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to make sure that we were kind of aware of that. Best case scenario, we wouldn't use our funds probably for the acquisition or total development cost. We could contribute to it, maybe, you know, as contributing toward doing wells or septic or engineering or whatever. And there are a number of sources out there that would pay for acquisition that would help subsidize the cost of construction to keep it affordable, et cetera.
Cool.
But we're probably going to have we'll just be in a very competitive situation where our costs are going to be much higher than a lot of other folks. And just the recent experience that church community has had has been very difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to take any action specific to this one property, but it's good to have a conversation about potential.
Mhm.
Well, and there is an ordinance on the books about business districts, and within a quarter of a mile of the business district. I was hopeful when you first sent that out. I went rushing right down to see where it was. It's about a half a mile out. I don't know exactly where the business district in Adamsville ends, but it's probably about a half a mile outside. So that probably doesn't apply. But
Sorry, could you clarify what you're referring to, Susan?
When the town first had its affordable housing plan that was put together, one of the proposals in there was to allow up to 6 units on a lot in the business district or within a quarter of a mile of the business district.
Oh.
And that came about with some arguments that, you know, folks could certainly walk to the business district. They didn't have to be right in it. And that's how the Arkins development came about, and as 6 units, because it met that criteria.
And there's no limit on property size.
No.
So interesting. That's worth looking into.
Mhm.
There's also the avenue of seeking relief through the town, through the zoning board or the planning board. So,
Mhm.
but whether this piece of property or any other. but
I guess that's my, my point earlier was what's going to be the biggest bang for our buck as a housing trust?
Right.
Where can we get the most return for the money that we have? And if this property's, if this property fits that bill, then then I think that'd be great. But I just think, we do have limited funding at this point, so I think we need to find out where we can be the most effective in town.
this conversation likely would, the next step in any piece of property would likely be a conversation with the town council. Is there a way, Andrew, that you would see we could extend this conversation toward the town council, whether for this specific piece of property or in preparation for any specific piece of property?
Sure, I can help facilitate that.
Is
going
it
forward.
something that, I mean, I'm happy to speak with the council as well, should it be necessary,
Mhm.
or anyone else for that matter, I'm sure, how do we, I guess if we got them a little closer in the loop, we may have some of our questions answered.
Okay. Well, why don't you and I work on that offline? Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. If ever,
Any other comments, questions to add about any properties, this, that, or the other? All right. The sixth item on the agenda this evening is correspondence, and Isabel, we had noted that there was none this month, which would lead
Correct.
us to our final item on the agenda, which is adjournment, if we do have such a motion.
So moved.
to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous consent.